Thank you very much. Awesome to be here. Compared to what we've just seen, I am not a blockchain expert. So I know a little bit about it. But I'm not actually here today to speak to you about what I know about blockchain. What I thought would be much more interesting was to speak about what I know about energy. So I've been in the energy industry for 10 years. We're building a lot of innovation. And I thought that maybe what I could do was to sort of sparkle some ideas around some of the problems that we see in our industry, and maybe use that as the start of a conversation around what are some of the things that we might be able to do with blockchain in the energy industry. So maybe quickly to start, why is energy potentially an interesting place for blockchain? And the reason is really simple. There's about 3 key reasons for it. The first one is that energy is something with networks, right? It has multiple parties, it has multiple transactions happening all the time. This at both a regional level, which is a country or even sometimes states, as well as an international level. So you're in this environment where you have many different stakeholders doing many transactions, right? So quite typical, quite similar to what you see in the finance sector. The second reason is that the energy industry is going through a massive change. And this is something we've been seeing happening for the past 10 years, and that is accelerating continuously, which is what we call decentralization. So before, the world of energy basically consisted of large power stations that would provide mostly carbon energy and inject it into the network. Today, energy is more and more becoming something that is decentralized, which means it's being produced on solar panels on your roof, it's being produced in very decentralized and very local fashions across the network, and the network becomes all the more complex. So you need all the more transaction intelligence, if I can say, in order to enable it. And the third one is that it's a sector that still today is an extremely manual sector. You'd be surprised at how much things are done manually. And so those 3 reasons, for me, really highlight that there's an opportunity for blockchain to make something really interesting happening here. So if you do a bit of research, of course, you'll find that there's a lot of research that exists on all these potential applications. And I won't touch on these, because I'm sure that if you're interested in the subject, you've probably read about them. But what we did was we went to go and look into some of the problems we see as energy operators, as people who've been in the industry for a long time, and what do we see that potentially could be resolved with this technology. The first one is that essentially today in the energy industry we were completely wrong in the way we address our customers. So I don't know if you've noticed, but so you see that energy companies, whether they're big, whether they're small, whether they're renewable, whether they're carbon intensive, they do one thing. They try to sell you a product that is undifferentiatable, that nobody understands, and they try to say that they're different, right? So it's sort of, it's weird, right? And so they've been trying to do that for many years, and they continue to do it. And on the other side, you have customers like you and me who get every month an electricity bill, and you're like, what is this? Why is my electricity bill going up? Why am I paying for kilowatt hours? Nobody understands this stuff, right? And so it's impossible today in the approach we have to actually create a love relationship between the product, which is so fundamental to our economy, and the way that it's being served to customers. And so the way we're thinking about this today is that instead of talking to you about kilowatt hours and amounts of energies and dollars and that sort of things, we should be talking about, you want to have a car that drives you from A to B. You want to have a washing machine that gives you a clean t-shirt when you want to wear one. You want to have a TV that actually shows you the Netflix series you want to see. You want to have, and so on, and so on, and so on. And so, why is this interesting? Because what it means is that the energy industry is moving from selling you a commodity towards selling you an outcome. And with selling you an outcome, suddenly it becomes, this can fundamentally start changing the structure of how retail happens, because suddenly you don't need a customer to pay an electricity bill at the end of its month in its house, but instead you might have an automated blockchain transaction that is basically in a fridge, where the fridge is doing a micro-transaction wherever it's connected, buying electricity from whoever provides the cheapest electricity. And so you might imagine that instead of going and buying a fridge and paying for that fridge, and then going and having a retail agreement with somebody who sells electricity, you just buy a fridge and you pay a monthly subscription, and that fridge comes with electricity automatically. And so this sounds really simple, right? But it's in today's infrastructure that we have, as in payment infrastructure that we have in the energy sector, it's impossible. Yet, we believe that it's actually the way things will evolve. And so blockchain is probably one of the ways to address this. I haven't seen this, by the way. So if anybody wants to work on this, we'd be very interested to talk. Now, the next one, and that's actually one that we've worked on ourselves. And so I wanted to show it as a use case of a blockchain use case that we are commercializing today, and for which we're actually earning dollars today. And so it's about the origin of energy. When you look at energy, right, you have a big electricity grid. And that electricity grid is basically a bunch of wires, a bunch of transformer, physical hardware infrastructure across a country. And so what happens is that you have solar panels injecting solar energy onto the grid, big and small. You have nuclear power plants injecting electricity onto the grid. You have gas-fired power plants injecting electricity onto the grid. You have wind farms. And so basically you get this massive pool of electrons, which is electricity. And you can't really distinguish which is green, which is gray, and it doesn't really matter because you, in the end, you will just be pulling electricity off that grid, and there's no way for you to know where it comes from. So we've been working on something which we call the energy origin, which is called TIO. And so TIO is very simple. It's a blockchain-based platform that essentially allows us to offer to our customers exactly the knowledge of which electron that came into their house came from which power plant across the country, across the continent sometimes in Europe, and has been feeding their production process. And why is this interesting? Because suddenly they, as a customer who have, for example, 100% renewable obligation towards their own customer, they're able to say, this tire was manufactured with renewable electricity. And so, of course, today they are just able to show a blockchain certificate, if you want, of that. They can show that to their customer. Tomorrow, they can actually, their tire could be on the blockchain itself and become recorded as a renewable tire. And so that's really interesting because in this way, you're able to sort of demonstrate the entire chain of changes of material manufacturing, if you want, that happened, and trace it back to its initial origin. This is nothing new, right? I mean, we've seen this use case across different industries, and this today is a use case that works. And so we're selling this to customers. We're selling renewable energy in this way today in Europe to customers. Now, the third one is a bit more of a tricky one. And it's really a personal experience I've had. So I've developed renewable energy projects for quite some time here in Asia. And developing projects is really hard, intense labor. I'm sure some people in the room can confirm that. And so the reason is that if you want to develop a renewable energy project, say a solar project, the first thing you have to do is you have to go and find a buyer. So you have to go and shop around, have coffees, have lunches, build relationships, find somebody who's willing to buy power from you over a certain duration of time. Then, once you find somebody who is actually willing to sign a contract with you for 20 years, you have to go and find a site. Either a big piece of land, a roof, something. Once you've got that, then you need to go and talk to the market, to the grid operator, and get network access. And you need to make sure that your site actually is on the right location, that you have right of way to get to the transmission line. Very complicated. Then you have to go to talk to equipment vendors, negotiate price. You have to go see whether you fit regulation. You have to seek funding for these projects. You have to meet certain investment criteria, and so on, and so on. And so what happens is that all of these processes are very difficult because they require discovery. Because they require me, as one of the 100 developers out there trying to develop projects, to go and discover all these things, to go and discover the right customer, to go and discover the right site, and to make sure that the right site is connected to the right transmission line. Well, in fact, if you think about this, what if you had blockchains for these things? What if you had different pieces of the puzzle that were different blockchains? And maybe I don't say it in right terms, but what if one of them was, hey, I want to buy power, right? So So my characteristics of a buyer are on a blockchain. And what if somebody else who has sites and his characteristics of what the right site is are on there? And what if investors are there as well with certain characteristics? And once those conditions are met, smart contract locks in basically immediately the transaction. And so what could happen is that you can actually imagine that all these blocks automatically fall together as soon as the right conditions are met. And so you no longer have this manual discovery process, which is so immensely inefficient, but instead you have a sort of automatic matchmaking. That once the different conditions are met along very clearly defined KPIs, once these are met, smart contracts execute and a transaction happens, which can be a multi-million-dollar transaction for a power plant. So I'd love to see that, by the way. So why am I telling you all of this? Because I'm working for ENGIE Factory. ENGIE Factory is this entity, is basically the venture arm of the ENGIE group, which is a big energy group. We are not blockchain experts. We don't know this stuff, right? So we've developed an application with people we've hired for that, but that's not our specialty. What we know is that we know there's problems in our industry, and we're trying to solve these problems. And so the way we're trying to do that is by collaborating with people who know about this. And so we do this in two ways. The first one is we venture scale, which basically means we look for great startups in these spaces who solve some of these problems. And what we try to do with them is to basically give access to our markets in order for them to solve those problems. And of course, for us to be able to offer that to our customers. In the other one, which I hope one day to see some of these problems being solved, is that we actually look for founders, for entrepreneurs who know how to solve these problems and who are willing to make a jump and join us in actually solving one of these problems. And so what we do is we work together for 3 months, and if we get the problem solved, we then basically incorporate a company and try to make that a new company that runs on its own with us as an investor and basically as a way to foster it to grow. And so that's the reason why today I wanted to talk about these problems, because these are things maybe for some of you know how to solve, and we'd be very interested to have a chat on that then later. All right, so if this is interesting, feel free to get in touch with me. I'll be around afterwards and we can chat. Thank you.